I've always had a fascination with the past, with objects that seem to carry the weight of history within them. That's why, when I stumbled upon the small antique shop nestled between two modern boutiques, I couldn't resist stepping inside. The shop was filled with relics from bygone eras, old clocks, tarnished jewelry, and faded photographs of long-dead strangers. But it was in a dark corner, half hidden behind a stack of old books, that I found her, a porcelain doll, her once beautiful face now cracked and worn, her dress tattered and yellowed with age. I don't know what compelled me to pick her up. There was something about her, something that seemed to reach out to me, as if she were calling my name. The shopkeeper, an elderly man with a hunched back and watery eyes, seemed almost too eager to sell her to me. He accepted my offer without haggling, his hands trembling slightly as he wrapped the doll in an old newspaper. "Take care of her," he murmured as he handed the package to me. His voice was so quiet that I almost didn't hear him. "She's been through a lot." I smiled and nodded, thinking his words were just part of the antique shop experience, a little bit of theatrics to add to the mystique. I had no idea what I was bringing home. That first night, I placed the doll on a shelf in my bedroom. She looked oddly out of place among my modern decor, her lifeless eyes staring blankly at the room. I remember feeling a slight chill as I got into bed, but I dismissed it, telling myself it was just my imagination. I awoke in the middle of the night to a sound that I couldn't immediately identify. It was a soft, scratching noise like something brushing against the wall. I sat up, my heart pounding in the darkness, and strained to listen. The sound was faint, but it was definitely there, coming from the direction of the doll. I flicked on the bedside lamp, and the room was flooded with light. The doll was sitting exactly where I had left her, but her head had tilted slightly to the side, her eyes now focused directly on me. I laughed nervously, telling myself that the doll must have shifted when I placed her on the shelf. I reached out to adjust her, but as soon as my fingers touched the cold porcelain, a shiver ran down my spine. The doll's face was unnerving in the light. Her cracked lips seemed to curl into a slight, mocking smile. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me. I tried to focus on work, but my thoughts kept drifting back to the doll. I found myself glancing at her out of the corner of my eye, half expecting her to move when I wasn't looking. That night, the whispers began. They were faint at first, just a soft murmur that seemed to come from nowhere. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, cold, malicious. I lay in bed, my heart racing as I tried to pinpoint the source of the sound. It seemed to be coming from all around me, yet when I sat up and looked around, there was nothing there. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they filled the room, echoing off the walls. And then, just as suddenly as they had started, they stopped. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, my eyes fixed on the doll. I could feel her watching me, her presence a heavy weight in the room. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, and I could swear the temperature had dropped several degrees. The attempted disposal. By morning, I had convinced myself that I was just overtired, that the events of the previous night had been the result of a vivid nightmare. I decided to get rid of the doll, to take her back to the shop and demand a refund. But when I opened the front door, I found the shop had disappeared. The space where it had been was now a vacant lot, overgrown with weeds. Confused and more than a little unnerved, I went back home, the doll still in my possession. That night, the footsteps started. They were slow, deliberate, echoing through the hallway outside my bedroom. I bolted upright in bed, listening intently as the sound drew closer. I could feel my pulse quicken, my breath catching in my throat as the footsteps stopped just outside my door. There was a long, agonizing moment of silence, and then the door creaked open. I stared at the open doorway, my heart pounding in my ears. The doll was still on the shelf, but her head was now turned to face the door, her eyes glinting in the dim light. I could feel a cold breeze wafting into the room, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of decay. I couldn't take it anymore. The following morning, I wrapped the doll in a thick blanket and drove to the nearest dumpster, throwing her in without a second thought. I felt a momentary sense of relief as I watched the garbage truck pull away, taking the doll with it. The return. But my relief was short-lived. That night, I returned home to find the doll sitting on my bed, her eyes locked onto mine. I let out a strangled cry, backing away from the room in sheer terror. I could feel the walls closing in on me, the air thick with malevolence. Desperate, I called a friend who was knowledgeable about the occult. She arrived at my house with a bundle of sage and a small vial of holy water. As soon as she saw the doll, her face went pale. "This isn't just a haunted object," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This is a vessel. The spirit attached to it. It's strong, and it's angry." She performed a cleansing ritual, chanting softly as she waved the sage around the room. The air grew thick with smoke, and for a moment, I thought I saw a shadowy figure lurking in the corner, just out of sight. My friend sprinkled holy water on the doll, her hands shaking as she did so. The doll's porcelain skin seemed to sizzle under the droplets, a faint hissing sound filling the room. When the ritual was over, my friend turned to me, her face lined with worry. "I've done what I can," she said, "but this spirit, it's not going to give up easily. You need to get out of here now." The final confrontation. That night, I packed a bag and left the house, checking into a hotel across town. But sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see the doll's face, her cold eyes staring back at me. And then the whispers returned, louder than ever, echoing through the hotel room like a chorus of malevolent voices. I moved from place to place, trying to escape the doll's curse, but no matter where I went, she found me. The nightmares became more frequent, more vivid. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my throat raw from screaming, only to find the doll sitting on the bed beside me. Her cracked lips curled into that same mocking smile. I knew then that there was no escaping her. The doll had latched onto me, and nothing I did could break the bond. She was with me always, a constant, malevolent presence that fed off my fear. In a final act of desperation, I returned to the house and built a fire in the fireplace. I threw the doll into the flames, watching as the porcelain cracked and blackened, the dress turning to ash. The room filled with the stench of burning plastic and something else, something foul and rotten. For a moment, I thought I heard a high-pitched scream, but it was drowned out by the roar of the fire. I stayed until the fire died down, watching the last of the embers flicker and fade. But even as I stood there, I knew it wasn't over. The doll was gone, but the spirit it had housed, the darkness that had latched onto me, was still there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. And so I left, abandoning everything I had ever known. But no matter how far I run, I can still feel her presence, a cold breath on the back of my neck, a whisper in the dark. I know she's out there waiting, and this time, I'm not sure I'll survive.